What Hitler called the swastika was originally called the Gramadon, Gramadon. You will see Gramadons at the bottom sole of Buddha in Buddhist temples. You will see it in South America used with respect to Coatepalca, the crucified god of the Mexicans, at the time when Mexico was called Azteca. You would also see it all over Egypt, Ethiopia, and Sudan. It goes back to about 1400 BC in the Nile Valley, and it was used as a symbol of peace. What Hitler did was to adopt it. The Germans under Kaiser Wilhelm and Otto von Bismarck captured what was then Togo.
Dr. Yusuf Ben-Jochannan, often revered as one of the most profound African historians and scholars of his time, dedicated his life to uncovering the truth of African history and exposing the distortions perpetuated by Eurocentric narratives. Born in Ethiopia and educated in both Egypt and the United States, Dr. Ben-Jochannan, affectionately known as Dr. Ben, was a fierce advocate for historical accuracy and the reclamation of African heritage. His work aimed to dismantle the myths that European historians had long promoted, to demean African culture and elevate Western civilization as the pinnacle of human progress. He believed that these distortions led to a widespread lack of self-pride and self-respect among people of African descent, and he tirelessly worked to reverse these damaging narratives through rigorous research and impassioned lectures. Central to Dr. Ben-Jochannan's scholarship was his commitment to teaching African history in its fullness, particularly the accomplishments of ancient African civilizations, including those in Egypt, which he argued was an African society rather than a Middle Eastern or Western one. He countered the prevalent falsehood that Africa's contributions to world civilization were insignificant or non-existent, instead showcasing Africa's achievements in science, mathematics, medicine, agriculture, and philosophy. Dr. Ben-Jochannan's work on Kemet, the ancient name for Egypt, emphasized that this civilization laid the foundation for much of what is celebrated in Western history. He highlighted the African origins of knowledge systems often attributed to Greece and Rome, uplifting a shift in the way global history is taught and understood.
Time when the other European powers and Great Britain, with the help of the United States, was conquering all of Africa, from 1830, when France invaded Ceuta, to 1884, when they took almost all of the lands on the coast and gave Congo to Leopold II. It was then, when Germany was fighting France for Alsace-Lorraine, that the Germans realized that they weren't getting part of the action, went into Togo, took over Togo, and it is then that they adopted the eagle, the iron eagle, by the patron saint of Germany, an African by the name of Maurice, which they call Maurice of Aragon, along with the symbol that Maurice used as the bishop. You would notice, if you go to the Museum of Natural History in New York, you would see a Togolese garment from the 14th century with the Gramadon and the Iron Cross and the eagle, which the German adopted from their colonial underlings, the Togolese, and that's where it came from.
Yes. How did the mission systems choose to develop Western Jewish?
Well, what was called the mystery system, which is the educational system of the Nile Valley, centered at the Grand Lodge of Waset, which is now called Luxor by the Arabs, is that every discipline, a child went in at age 7, a young boy, and he was not completed with his education until age 47. He never left. It took 40 years to train an educated man who left with the title priest. So within that 40 years, he learned everything there was. And as such, he even influenced the Pharaoh because he decided most of the things the Pharaoh had to do. Thus, engineering, law, medicine, science, mathematics, everything was done and taught in the mystery system. And those students coming out of the mystery system were sent around the nation to be the teachers. So the mystery system was the educational system of the entire Nile Valley. Not only Egypt. Egypt became the zenith of what took place, the high cultures along the Nile. And so that's how the mystery system. Now, in order, like any society, there are a group of elite within the educational system. And they became the elite. Thus, it was necessary for them to have, quote unquote, passwords and so forth to maintain secrets amongst each other. Because education, believe it or not, is not for the masses. You must know it. The masses can't afford $1,300 a semester. Education is for elite few. It have always been. That's reality. You know, we want things to be, and so we say it is. But the reality is that count the amount of blacks who come to college, and you will see it is for select few. And so in those ancient days, it was yet for a select fewer, because very few people could read and write. And those who went to the mystery system became the intellectuals of their day. It helped because if you know all the disciplines, then you could bet. Then you don't talk about mystery. For example, my oldest girl is a physician, and when she was taking her exam in surgery, I was invited to come in the theater and look down from the gallery to see her perform. And while others were doing their open heart surgery work for grades, I sat beside my daughter, and when they started to take the heart out of the patient, I said, what a miracle. And my daughter said to me, Daddy, I'm surprised at you saying that. There ain't no miracle, he just made a mistake. I said, what are you talking about? She said, Daddy, you know, and you told me, what one man knows that the other doesn't know is no longer a miracle. It is the miracle to the man who doesn't know it. But to the person who knows it, it's just routine. It's no miracle. She was right, because I taught her that. So it's no mystery. It's a mystery only to the person who doesn't know it, but it isn't to one who performs it. So that's what it did. It teaches man. And the women had their own organization, by the way, sisters, because you must say, why, how come the little boys only? They were women organization, and one of the reasons for that is that a man had to testify. One of since at age 7, all the boys were circumcised. They also had to testify. A woman cannot testify, even in the Christian church. Look in your dictionary for the word testis and testify and see where the word testify come from. To testify, a man had to hold his penis out in his left hand, raise his right hand, and swear if he told the truth, told a lie, may God unman him. You can't unman a woman if she got a testis. Kind of funny. So when women are testifying in these sacred churches, just tell them you're doing miracles.
Yes, sir.
Yes.
On self-education, the state of college students, and I acknowledge you to say, although she refers a man judging telling college students on how to relate self-education to university training and education.
No, self-education doesn't necessarily mean that you don't go to the university. Self-education is saying, along with the prescribed courses at the university, you have to do a certain amount of self-education. You have to take a certain amount of interest in yourself and as such study about yourself. The professors can do but so much for any of us. Much of it is going to have, first of all, your education doesn't take place in four walls of a university. Your training takes place there. Your education is going to come on the outside when you start to apply your training and acquire experience. It is said commonly, the center of education, and of course we believe that we've got that. What we have fed is a series of facts or a series of evidence, and then we take these evidence and regurgitate the answer to those evidence. But when you go outside and you get your experience, it is really then that your education starts. So to self-education, I meant that kind of education which you found in Harriet Tubman and Sojourner Truth and others. But don't stop your training in the college just for the self-education. I wouldn't do that. I wouldn't have done it for myself, and I wouldn't encourage anyone to do that. I take all ends. I read everything and that I could get my hand on. I don't care. If the Ku Klux Klan is passing out some literature in the morning, I'll get some. Because you don't know what your enemy thinking if you don't find out from him. So I read anything. I read the Ku Klux Klan. I read the Moral Majority. I read what's the one that the guy got shot down at the airplane there, John Birch Society writings, and also read the Jehovah's Witness and the Mormons. I read everything. Because I don't know which one going to kill me in the morning. All of them look crazy to me. The what? The Ankh and the what? Oh, the dollar? Oh, the green side of the American dollar with the pyramids and the sunbus and the eye of Horus. Well, if you recall, the first president of the United States, a terrorist by the name of George Washington. Oh yeah. According to the British, you still go on England, you see it written there, George Washington had 30,000 pounds on his head for terrorism. I'm talking about the murderer, George Washington. The slave owner, George Washington. You see, isn't it strange that we see Hitler as a bad man? But you know, Hitler didn't enslave one black American. George Washington did. George Washington sold black folks the day of his inauguration from molasses to Barbados. But he's a good man. You see, you don't want to reason because that may, you say, he's the president of my father of my country. He ain't father of no country of mine. He has nothing to do with fatherhood of me. He's a slave master. Every one of them in the cabinet was slave masters except Benjamin Franklin, because he was a Quaker. And that's why he lost becoming the first president. But anyhow, Washington was a member of the Masonic group. And as such, when the first union was founded, it was founded, and the Masons were the strongest force and allied themselves as a common unit within the founding group. It is so that they, in looking for symbols for their money, they took Masonic symbols, the Masons who had adopted it, the Freemasons who had adopted the 22 tablets they stole from Egypt, from the mystery system, and carried to York, England, and established what they call York Rites with 22 degrees. Later, in Scotland, they added 11 more, call it the Scottish Rites. And the 11 degrees they call the Effable Rites, which put Christianity into Freemasonry where it has no business. And it is so that they decided to use those symbols, the pyramid or house of fire, the word in Greek means house of fire, the sunburst which symbolized the power and strength of God Ra, and the eye which symbolizes the Ujet, U-D-J-E-T, which is known as the ever-seen eye of Horus. That's the combination there. They did not stop there, because in the Supreme Court, the so-called Department of Justice, they then adopted from the scene of justice with Goddess Ma'at. Goddess Ma'at is shown with a crown on her head and a feather of truth. And there is the heart symbolically of Annie the scribe. And in the other part of the scale is a feather, and his heart is symbolically weighed against the feather of truth. And there Kepra is recording. Anubis is there ready to swat him if his heart isn't correct. That was adopted with a woman with the blind with the same sword. But you notice one thing about that. There was no intent to have justice. The scale isn't balanced. One part of the scale is up and the other is down. There was never intent. The artist did what was right, because you don't have a democracy. It said a republic. And you see, we don't read too well. There's nothing in the Constitution anywhere said democracy. It says a republic. One will rule and the other will be ruled. We could go and see other symbols adopted by the United States from your ancestry. And you say, well, how come they do all that and adopt all that from me and then enslave me? Easy. A thing called gunpowder and the cannon. In other words, I'm telling you, might is right. If the judge gives you 30 days in jail, would you go to jail voluntarily, just walk and go to jail? The only reason you go to jail is the man called a bailiff and another one called a marshal. And the marshal got a gun on his side, and there are umpteen marshals there with guns on their side, and the policemen in the hall waiting with guns on their side. So you decide, I'm going to jail. But take away those guns and you tell the judge to go to hell and walk right out. Might is the thing that make you go to jail, not right. And there's no such thing as justice when you're broke. If you were broke and you had a case, you found guilty, you can't appeal when you're broke. Your lawyers can't buy the minutes of the trial when you're broke. So you can't get justice. When last did they hang or electrocuted a rich man? Son. You see, like Patty Hearst, they could get psychiatrists to disagree with psychiatrists who disagree with psychiatrists. They can buy justice. There's no justice for poor people. You gotta have money to guarantee justice. Let's say you were poor and you had shot, what's his name in the house there? Regamus. You wouldn't have been in no crazy house. You'd have been under the crazy house. But his daddy had money. Umpteen pounds of loot. Do you think that he didn't talk to the judge? You think that Patty Hearst didn't talk to the man who was going to free her? He said, even if she was found guilty, he was going to give her pardon. Talking about the peanut vendor man from Carterville. Justice. I know it's frustrating and you believe in all the beautiful things. I've been in the armed forces, I've been all over the place, and I haven't seen justice yet. I've seen just this. Yes.
Yes, somebody what is the difference between a Mason who has been initiated, passed, raised, and Masons we call clandestine?
Clan, and what side?
Clandestine.
Clandestine
Mason.
Clandestine?
Clandestine, too.
The jackass who said that the one is clandestine is just as clandestine as the other one. You see what happened? What happened is that one man always believed that he got the right way. The fact is that either Mason is a clandestine, because the Mason in America got his garbage from England, and the English stole 22 tablets from Egypt and established what they call York rights. Who gave it to them? The Scots, I said before, added to that and called the Ethelbert rights. 11 were the Scottish rights. So when one man called another man a clandestine, what does he mean about it? He got his the same way the other one got it, by crookery. A thief can't call another one a thief with no sense of dignity. Unfortunately, is that we take the left over from everybody and think we got something. How could you talk about a secret society marching in the middle of the street with top hat? You're not secret if you march in the middle of the street. Contradictions. How are you going to build a building with top hat? People are masons with a trowel and with mortar. But again, you see, Europeans do it, so it's got to be right. So we get into it too. How could you talk about the Grand Lodge of Luxor and then at the same time say that it comes from Solomon? If the Grand Lodge is in Luxor, Solomon ain't got nothing to do with it. Solomon is only 991 and 971 BC. The Grand Lodge of Karnak, the Grand Lodge of Saqqara, more than 3,000 years before the birth of Solomon. King Solomon has nothing to do with Freemasonry. Nothing, absolutely. It is a distortion of the works of the Africans along the Nile that early Hebrews did by putting Solomon into it. I suggest that they go to the Grand Lodge of Luxor, which the ruins are still there in a place called Luxor, and see for themselves the symbols, see for themselves the kind of aprons and the kind of vestment that the ancient Africans used in the mystery system.
Dr. Ben-Jochannan also urged black people to study not only African history, but also the history of the world, emphasizing that understanding one's adversaries requires knowing their histories and cultural narratives. He saw history as a form of warfare, a battleground on which perceptions are shaped and societies are defined. By reading widely across cultures, particularly the works of historians from diverse backgrounds, Dr. Ben-Jochannan believed black people could gain strategic insight into the psychology, values, and motivations of those who have oppressed them. His teachings encourage black individuals to think critically, question dominant narratives, and reclaim the right to define themselves through an honest recounting of history. Furthermore, Dr. Ben-Jochannan emphasized the importance of self-education and community-based learning. He believed that educational institutions in the West often failed to provide authentic accounts of African history, and he encouraged black communities to establish their forms of learning. Through books, lectures, and documentaries, he presented African history as a means of empowerment and resilience, arguing that a true understanding of one's roots fosters dignity and unity. His work inspired a generation of black scholars, activists, and everyday people to seek the truth for themselves and to pass this knowledge down to further generations as an act of resistance and pride. Dr. Yusuf Ben-Jochannan's lifelong dedication to historical truth and the promotion of African heritage has impacted the understanding of global history. By challenging the lies and omissions of European historiography, he empowered countless individuals to reject the inferiority complex instilled by colonial narratives and instead embrace a heritage of greatness. His legacy calls for continuous learning, for black people to read widely and critically, and to understand that history is not merely a study of the past, but a tool of shaping identity, unity, and liberation. Dr. Ben-Jochannan's call for a renaissance of African knowledge continues to inspire those committed to justice, pride, and truth in representing African history and culture.